Now let me tell you about my uncle Dalphus. Boy, you're all hot. My uncle Dalphus lived in a place here in South Carolina, not real far from here, called Green Sea. A little bitty town back of farm. And I used to go up there and I'd stay during the summer with him. And my Uncle Dalphus was a really big guy. He was like about 6'4", about 325 pounds. And what he did for a living was he raised hogs for a living. And I can remember seeing him take like a 300-pound hog and he'd grab that thing out in the middle and just pick it up and he'd set it in the back of the truck. The truck would go. But my Uncle Dalphus had never left the farm when he was young until the war came along and he was drafted into the army. Now he went over to Europe. In fact, he went to France. While he was over there, just a few days he was there, a bomb blew up right next to him. And when it did, it blew out his left eye. Just completely gone. It was nothing but a hole. So, yeah. And so they sent him home, you know, and he wore this patch over his hole. You know. He used to like you'd say, look at this. Well, he went to the VA hospital to get a glass eyeball. Now, a glass eyeball is really cool, you know, because it looks just like a real eyeball, you know. And he went to get one, and he went in there, and he told the man, he said to the man, what are you here for? And the man said, oh, you want an eyeball? Okay, so he took this big box from behind the counter, and he dumped it out, and all these glass eyeballs came rolling all over the table. Now, you see, even back then, the government was short of money. And so what they would do, and there weren't a whole lot of glass eyeballs around, you know, just not like, you don't go find glass eyeball shops on every corner like, you know, a 7-Eleven store. So what they would do is they would take the glass eyeball and they'd give it to somebody, and when they would die, they'd take it out and wash it off and they'd put it back in the box. And then when the next person had come along, then they'd find one to fit him. Well, Uncle Dalphus went in there, and I was looking through all these eyeballs. Now, he had brown eyes, or a brown eye. And, but because he was such a big guy, you know, there weren't a whole lot of eyeballs that were the right size, and they found one that looked like it was pretty close, but it was blue. But Uncle Dalphus said, well, I can't see out of it anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. So they stuck that thing in, and it fit pretty good, except it was just a little bit loose. And sometimes when he'd turn his head this way, it'd go, he'd turn his head there, like this. Well, one day, about a week after he had his eyeball, his wife, my Aunt Blanche, was in the kitchen and she was fixing a big old pot of stew, and he was sitting there and he was reading the paper, and boy, that stuff smelled so good. He went in there and he was smelling that pepper, got up his nose, and the eyeball went. Now they took a spoon and they dug all around, but all they could get was like potatoes and carrots and stuff. So they had to wait for like 3 days till they ate it all the way down to the bottom, and then they found the eyeball and they took it out and they washed it off. It was kind of orange looking, you know how stew turns. But Uncle Dalphus said, hey, can't see out of it anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. So he stuck it back in. Well, on his 65th birthday, his kids decided that it was time for him to leave the farm again and go to the fair. Now, how many of y'all have been to the fair before, like the Coastal Carolina Fair? Yeah. Well, remember now, he had never left the farm except just to go in the Army, and he came back and he never left again until they decided for his birthday present to take him to the fair. Well, they all loaded up in the truck, and they headed up to the fair. Well, they got in, and you know, you can imagine if you've never been to a fair before, Uncle Dalphus sees all these rides and all this kind of stuff. And his son said, Daddy, what do you want to ride first? And he saw that sign there, said roller coaster. He said, let's ride that. Oh. Well, I don't know. If, you know, you've never ridden rides before, that could be kind of scary. And Uncle Dalphus said, I ain't scared enough. So they went over and they got on the roller coaster. Now, you know, normally on a roller coaster, 2 people sit side by side, right? Well, Uncle Dalphus was, you know, a pretty big guy. And so when he got in the roller coaster, he kind of wedged down in the seat there, and there wasn't room for anybody else, so his kids sat behind him. Well, they pulled that bar down, but he was so big it wouldn't come all the way down. But he just put his he had his big old huge arms, and he put those things over top of the bar, so when the girl came by, you know how they came by, tugging on the bar. His didn't move, so the roller coaster started. And you know how they go. They start out kind of slow, and then all of a sudden, start going up. Uncle Dalphus is sitting there, and the thing's going, and pretty soon he notices the birds, you know, are flying real close and everything. And he's wondering if the airplanes, you know, go underneath this thing or over top of it. And it's going up and up and up. And his son tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Dad, now, this is a scary ride." And they got up to the top, and he goes, you know how it stops on top for a second? And Uncle Dalphus said, "Well, that ride weren't so bad." He got down and then it came to the loop-de-loops. Now, it wasn't so bad on the first one, because but the second time, it kind of slowed down a little bit. And it got up in the middle, and he leaned forward, and that bar just went, and he came flipping out, and landed head first on top of the people in front of him. And they're down at the bottom, and his feet are dangling there. And when it pulls in and stops, the man looks over, and here's his legs sticking out of his suit. And it took 4 of them, and they grabbed him, and they pulled him out. And they got him out, and he was kind of staggering around like this and said, "Let's do that again." No, I think that's enough for now. Let's go over and do some of the games. Now, they went over to where the games, you know, you've seen the ones where they have the milk bottles stacked up, and you take the baseball and you throw and knock them down. Well, he went over there, and, you know, he saw the grand prize hanging up on the very top there. Was a 6-foot-long pink fuzzy alligator. Now, he thought that would look really cool, and he wanted to win it. So he put down some money, and he got those baseballs. Now, there's one problem when you only have one eyeball, and that is that, you know, your depth perception isn't too good. So he threw those balls. There's a milk ball. He thought it didn't go, you know, all around. He couldn't hit those milk balls at all. Then he kind of get a little bit discouraged. But his son said, "Dad, let's go do something else. Stop this for a while." So they went over and decided to ride the bumper cars. So they went over to the bumper cars, and Uncle Dalphus goes up there, you know, and he kind of wedges himself down in the seat, and the steering wheel's like right here. And the man turns the machine off, and everybody's going around the track except Uncle Dalphus, because the man forgot to tell him about the little button down there, and he'd never ridden before, so he's just sitting there. And the cars come around the corner, and here's this big, huge target right there. After about 3 times, he started getting a little mad, and the next car came flying up there, just reached out and grabbed the front of it, went, well, the man came out and he said, "You can't do that," and he showed him where the little button was. So he goes, and now he's going along. Now he's so big and heavy, whenever he hits somebody, he just, I mean, they're just going everywhere. Well, he came around the corner, and these 2 guys and these other 2 bumper cars, they decided to get even with him. So one of them got on each side, right up at the front, and so he couldn't turn, and he's turning the steering wheel, and the car just going straight, and they ran him right into the wall. Bam! And it hit that wall, and he came flying up, and his eyeball went, went across the track, out the other side, and knocked down 2 rows of milk bottles. He got off the ride, and he went over there to the man, and he said, "I'd like my eyeball and my pink alligator, please." Well, the man, you know, he looked around, and sure enough, there was Uncle Dalphus's blue-orange eyeball laying on the ground. Had a big old chip in it, but Uncle Dalphus can't see out of it anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. And so he gave him back his eyeball and the 6-foot-long pink fuzzy alligator. Now, Uncle Dalphus took that alligator home, and he nailed it right up over his fireplace. And whenever people would come over, this is what he'd tell them. He'd say, "Yep, I went gator hunting down in the Everglades. We was in our canoe, and we was paddling along when this alligator grabbed the front and flipped it right over. Lucky for me, I had a hold of the paddle. It was a terrible fight. I was hitting it. He was biting, but I killed him. And there he is, hanging up on the wall." Now, there's not too many people going to argue with a 6'4", 350-pound guy. So they all just said, nice alligator. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of y'all like to read?